This talk is What's Up with Emoji by Kamile Demir, who is a computer scientist at Adobe and Adobe representative of the Emoji subcommittee of the Unicode Consortium.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to What's Up with Emoji. I hope you've been enjoying the ATypI talks that have been happening throughout the day, and I'm excited for you to join me to talk about emoji. So let's get into it. So we can talk about emoji in so many ways, right? But today we're going to look at it in two angles, emoji trends and emoji creativity. So when we're looking at emoji trends, I'm going to dive specifically into the Adobe Emoji Trend Report that recently came out. So we're going to look at some numbers together, but really the point of this is for us to have a better understanding of where our emoji are today. How are they being perceived? How are they being used? You know, why are some emoji more frequently used than others? Things like that. Then that's going to transition us into emoji creativity. What makes a good emoji? And this question is very broad, right? There could be so many answers and so many angles to look at this. And I'm curious what this question means to you. But when we're looking at this, first, I'm going to look at it from the angle of the Unicode emoji subcommittee. So if you're curious about what emoji submissions look like and what the ESC, the emoji subcommittee for short, what the ESC looks for in terms of criteria for good emoji. I'll talk about that a little bit as Adobe's representative within the Unicode emoji subcommittee. But also, I'm going to talk about some uses of emoji in sequences, and then we're going to dive a little bit into a little bit of font technology that are useful when looking at emoji that are implemented as a font. So as a quick introduction, I'm Kamile. I'm a computer scientist at Adobe Fonts and Type. And I work on the AFDKO among other tools for font developers and designers. AFDKO stands for Adobe Font Development Kit for OpenType. It's a suite, an open source suite of tools for font development. And so I work on different things here, and I'd love to talk about the FDK, the AFDKO for short, FDK, another time. But today I'm here to talk about emoji because I represent Adobe within the Unicode emoji subcommittee. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the research that came out on Adobe's side. But really, I'm excited to be here. I joined the team at Adobe Fonts and Type 2 years ago almost. And I've learned so much from everyone in this industry. And I attended ATypI virtually last year, and it was really great, really, really informative. And yeah, I'm excited to be here to talk to you about emoji. And my goal here is to give a broad range, a broad audience, a range of discussion topics that we can think about. So when we're thinking about our work as font developers, font designers, whatever the reason is that you're here, it's important to look at the use cases of these things. And so that's why I'm going to dive into some of the research and the data that we found and those kinds of things with emoji. And so I just spoke about some of the reasons why we're here, but let's talk a little bit more about that, right? First of all, why are we talking about emoji? Well, an overview emoji, in case you don't know yet. Emoji can be implemented as fonts, but also as images. So when I'm saying images, think about stickers, think about custom emoji stickers, all of that. It's a big world, and it's important to look at emoji. It's important to look at it as it's not just a font. It doesn't necessarily have to be a font. However, I will specify that here I'm mostly going to talk about emoji implemented as fonts. So you might know this, you might not. Different platforms have different emoji fonts. An example of this is if I send you a message and I am on device A, device type A, right? And you receive that message from device type B, and the devices have different emoji fonts, then you're going to see different emoji, right? And that's because emoji are fonts, and different platforms have different, well, emoji are fonts, sometimes implement that way, but different platforms have different emoji fonts, and so that's why you might see a difference there. This will be relevant later in our conversation, but and there's lots of examples of this. It's not just device A, device B type of situation, but wanted to mention that. So then I want to talk about how emoji are part of the Unicode technical standard, just like every character within the Unicode set. And this is where the Unicode emoji subcommittee comes into play. And I'll be talking about some of the criteria that the Unicode Emoji Subcommittee, ESC for short, looks at when looking at emoji submissions. And I'm going to be talking about that from the perspective of Adobe's representative. And all of that information is also on the Unicode website. It's a great resource. So if you're interested in that, I definitely recommend you check that out. Emoji are implemented in color font formats. I'm not going to dive too much into this, but I wanted to list this out. There's probably really great talks that are diving into some of this more at ATypI, and so if you're interested in this, definitely make sure you're looking at the agenda and watching all the sessions that you're interested in. And just to emphasize this last point, understanding emoji trends and uses within different contexts in the world can help us, the designers and developers, and everyone else in this industry think about future work. And so talking about that a little more, my goal in my position and my goal in this industry is to support designers and developers as a developer myself. And when we're talking about these trends and these uses, it definitely helps me as I think about when I'm looking at these results, for example. It helps me think about the future, how we're going to shape the future and things like that. And it's really exciting. And I hope it's exciting for you. So let's get on with it, right? And so, as I mentioned, let's dive into emoji trends. This is part 1. How are emoji being used and perceived? And specifically, we're going to talk about the future of creativity, the 2022 US Emoji Trend Report. And the report is it's very extensive, and there's lots of great data in there. I've put in some of the most important and helpful and interesting parts of that data into this presentation so that we can discuss a little bit more. So 91% of US emoji users agree that emoji make it easier for them to express themselves. And I'm curious, I think we have a chat, right? Do you agree with this? Does emoji help make it easier for you to express yourself? The emoji use can be very personal. So I'll share some of my experience of using emoji, right? I've watched emoji updates, and every year I was watching what new emoji are being coded and things like that for a while. And it's always exciting to see new emoji and to be able to use it. I have found that, for example, at work, using emoji at work has helped me adjust to the workplace, but also communicate with my team better. And that we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's efficient, right? We're busy more and more, and so using emoji as reactions, as quick reaction, as an approval, a thumbs up, things like that is really helpful, but also, that human connection. We're in the phase of the world where everything is slowly more digital, right? And that's why we're all here talking about, screens and digital text and things like that. And digital communication is hard. We're not face to face. We're not talking face to face, right? And so it's hard to convey our emotion within the words that we're using on a screen. And so that's why I believe this number is so high, 91%. Emoji is definitely making it easier for lots of people to express themselves in lots of environments. And I will talk about those environments a little bit more in the next few slides. But I'm curious to hear what you think about this, if you agree. So let's talk about the top 5 favorite emoji now among US emoji users. In the report, these emoji were among the top 5 favorite. And I'm curious if you find this confusing, if you agree with it. I do agree with it. I've seen these emoji a lot, and one thing to notice here is that 3 out of the 5 emoji are smileys. And smileys are the most frequently used emoji category. This that I'm referencing the Unicode emoji subcommittee's emoji frequency data, which can be found on the Unicode website in emoji frequency. And yeah, smileys are among the top 5 favorite and most frequently used. And it's again talking about that 91% expressiveness. We're talking about, users expressing themselves and things like that. And then thumbs up and heart. If I don't know if you've heard, but thumbs up actually has had some interesting reports on it on its own, where some people think that thumbs up is aggressive, and that's a whole other conversation, right? There are articles about it, lots of sources, but at the end of the day, it's a really quick way to react to something. And so the heart, the same thing. And thumbs up is not that expressive. It's more of a quick action, right? It's more of like, yeah, this is good. You're approving it. I use it a lot at work. And the heart is a quick way to express love and express affection. Again, all of the emoji, this is all showing that emoji is helping us be quicker and be expressive and be expressive quicker, right? And one thing I didn't put into my slides that I would love to mention is that I think over half of emoji users are now willing to purchase products using emoji. And I'm not sure, I guess that could be implemented in many ways, but I definitely want to mention that because we are talking about, what we are thinking about the future. And I'm curious what you think about that. I was surprised by it, but after thinking about it for a while and looking at the top 5 favorite and some of the other slides I'll talk about, it makes sense because emoji are a big part of our world now and our existence. And so the next phase is kind of just finding more ways to make things easier, make things efficient, buy things quicker. It's all part of that. So now let's talk about the top 3 most misunderstood emoji. A lot of people have asked me about this, and yeah, it leads to some interesting and sometimes funny conversations. Number 1 is my favorite, the cowboy hat emoji, and I am curious what you think about this. Before this report came out, I didn't really think much about this emoji. I don't know about you, but it just didn't mean much to me, right? And again, if we're looking at the details, it's because it's a smiley. It's smiling, right? This emoji is smiling, but it's wearing an accessory. And not a lot of emoji have accessory. Not a lot of smileys have accessories. And the cowboy hat it's not particularly expressing something, right? The sunglasses emoji is a little different. It's like, yeah, like the sunglasses is very iconic to be cool, to show coolness and, being relaxed, those kinds of connotations. But what does a cowboy hat emoji mean? And I guess that's why it's found its way into the top 3 most misunderstood emoji. But it's definitely been really fun to talk about and to hear everyone's own meaning for this emoji, and I've actually been using it a lot more frequently now. So then the next one, I will not go into too deep because honestly, it's interesting to talk about, right? The cherry emoji. I will say, yes, it can mean the fruit, it can mean just cherry, right? But it's the other meanings I think can be used similarly to the eggplant emoji, which I believe was also among the most misunderstood. We're going to see that emoji in a little bit. And then the last one is the upside down smiley. I use this emoji I use this emoji pretty often. I use it for when someone has said something and I don't agree with it. Like, I'm kind of looking at them from my side eye. You really mean that? Or I don't know about that, right? But maybe that's not what it means to you. So I'm curious to hear what you think of this emoji, and I will certainly be asking more people to figure out what number 3 means and why it's so misunderstood. So we already talked about work, right? With US emoji users agreeing that using emoji at work can help users. 79% of people say that emoji help them quickly share ideas. 62% say team decisions are more efficient, and 58% say that it's bringing creativity. And again, with my personal experience, I've found that emoji definitely helped me make quick reactions, things like that. And so, because I already spoke about this, I won't go too much more into it. But I think this is helpful for us to, again, see the use cases of emoji. They're not just like fun visual depictions of our expressions, right? It's very useful, and we're seeing that more and more. People want things quicker and quicker, right? And as the people who have the potential to work on emoji, let's think about where can we bring this to the next step. And so we spoke about work, we spoke about, our personal lives. So now let's dive a little bit into the top 3 make it or break it emoji that when it comes to flirting or dating. So this is, it's again yet another environment that people are using emoji. And so the top 3, doesn't surprise me that the top 3 are all smileys, and they're very expressive. My colleague Paul Hunt said something along the lines of, when in a relationship, people typically want to see lots of expression, right? You want to make sure that people are being honest with their expressions, and I guess that emoji use and honesty is a whole other topic. But typically, when you're receiving this top 3, these smileys with the hearts, it's intentional and it's authentic. People perceive it that way, at least, and so that's, it doesn't surprise me that those are the top 3 that make you more likable. And then the top 3 that make you less likable they have lots of number 2 is definitely very negative, right? You don't want to receive that when you're flirting or dating, right? Number 1 is pretty funny to me. I guess it's I'm curious. I'm curious what you think about number 1. Maybe this emoji has reached its use in some ways. Trying to put it into words. But yeah, I'm curious what you think about number 1. I guess it's funny. To me, it's funny. But there's lots of people, right? Lots of different ways of using this. And then number 3 is the eggplant emoji, and again, this is interesting. I think this comes from how direct it is. When receiving this type of emoji, again, it's very direct. It can have a very specific meaning, and I mean, all these things vary, right? But this is what was found in the research, so I'm curious about your opinion on it in general. And now to close out the emoji trends portion of this talk, 71% of US emoji users agree that inclusive emoji can help spark positive conversations about important cultural and societal issues. This is why I always look forward to reading the results of of emoji research, such as the Adobe Emoji Trend Report that we just spoke about. And again, that report has lots and lots of more details. If you want to go look at it, it is online. You can search for it. But yeah, so this is a very important number. Emoji are being used globally, and we're going to dive more into this in the next portion, so that it's a great transition. When we're looking at what makes an emoji good, as part of the ESC, I'm looking at, and we are always constantly discussing this. We're constantly discussing when looking at an emoji submission, what gap is this emoji filling in, and what gaps are currently existing in the emoji set. This is all very important to us, and so, and I love being part of those discussions, and again, seeing these results really help me and help us at Adobe, help us in the ESC think about what the future of emoji is. Right, we made it through part 1 with emoji trends, and I hope that was informative for you. It's definitely been very interesting to me finding out about those results and talking about it, and thinking more about it. And so I hope you get to have those discussions further, and I hope I get to hear more about those discussions as well. Part 2 is emoji creativity. So let's think creatively when using, designing, and developing emoji implemented as fonts. First, let's talk about emoji proposals. This is very interesting to lots of people, so I wanted to give an overview. What makes a good emoji? And again, as I mentioned, that question is very broad, right? It depends on the context, I guess. But speaking as Adobe's representative for the ESC, the ESC reviews every emoji proposal that is submitted, and they do a wonderful job at it. There is a big list of criteria that we look at when we're looking at each proposal. And that's key. That's really key for identifying what a good emoji is, identifying gaps in the emoji set that we hadn't thought of before, and kind of evaluating if an emoji is going to be useful in lots of ways. Is it going to be global? Is it going to be meaningful for a very long time? As you may know, once an emoji is encoded, we can't really take it out, right? So it is very important. It's a very important process. The ESC does a wonderful job at it from what I've witnessed, and it's humbling, and I'm grateful to be part of hearing those discussions. So I want to share with you the three criteria. Well, 3 criteria among the big list of criteria, but these are some of the criteria that I've found to be most important when identifying things within an emoji proposal. So multiple uses. Does it have multiple meanings? That's what we're really asking here. And these 3 emoji that I've used as examples is actually part of Emoji 15.0, which I will share in the next slide. These were encoded as part of Unicode 15.0 just a few weeks ago, quite recently. So yes, multiple uses. Does it have multiple meanings? A great example of this is the hair pick emoji. And so this emoji can mean the literal object, right? It can mean literal hair pick, but we're really looking for what does it mean beyond that? What does this object mean, right? Because you can propose many objects, and it has to have multiple meanings. So hairpick is such a great example because it has multiple cultural meanings, right? Cultural statements. It can represent Afro hair and Afro hair culture. It can represent Black culture. It can represent, it's really filling in that gap that was in the emoji set. And it can also even mean, looking through something, combing through something, carefully, or just hair care in general, right? It can be an accessory. There's lots of meanings here. And so when looking at that proposal, it was clear that it had multiple uses, which is why it was encoded as part of Emoji 15.0. Next is sequences. Does it fit in a sequence? And pink heart is a great example of this. I know that pink heart has been wanted for a long time. A lot of people wanted pink heart. I've heard about it lots of times, right? And so it's exciting that it's part of the most recent additions, right? So talking about this a little more, it wasn't encoded just because lots of people wanted it, right? It actually has a purpose. So pink heart has many uses in sequences. So when we're talking about sequences, we're talking about, does it fit into a sequence, right? Can you use this emoji with other emoji? And in that sequence, does this emoji add a new meaning? And the best example of this is pink heart representing colors of national or identity flags, right? We're talking about the colors here. So you put pink heart, you put another heart next to it, you put yet another heart next to it. Pink heart be missing from the emoji set meant that some of these national or identity flags weren't able to be represented. The colors weren't able to be represented because that pink heart was missing, right? So it was encoded, and actually 3 color hearts were encoded as part of Emoji 15.0. And I'll show you on the next slide the other hearts and the other emoji. But that's a really, when I found out about that, when I joined the committee and I learned about that, I thought that was really important, and so I wanted to mention that. And then distinctiveness, right? Is it identifiable at emoji sizes? And this is a great question. Maybe you haven't, maybe this is not something that you immediately think about, but no matter how good an emoji or a concept might be, if you can't distinguish that emoji is what it is trying to represent at emoji sizes, which is pretty small, we're going to have a hard time using it. And I love the goose emoji, and it's very symbolic, and it's easily distinguishable, even at small sizes, right? It's an iconic figure, and I also wanted to mention it because I love it personally, and that's also why it makes a good emoji. And so we're looking at this criteria for every emoji proposal, and there's a lot of them. And so I hope this gave you somewhat of an overview of what that review process looks like. And when you're thinking about what a good emoji might be in the future, and you're looking at emoji proposals, this is some of the many criteria that exist. And if you're curious more about emoji proposals and what the rest of the criteria are, it's on the Unicode emoji subcommittee website. If you just search for emoji proposals, you'll find it. So let's look at the Emoji 15.0 emoji that were encoded. These are 20 emoji, and I can't go through all of them, but when we were learning about the criteria in the last slide, right, that's a lot. That's a lot of things to review. And so when you look at this set and you wonder, how did these all make it? Think about what each one might mean. And you can do research on it. It's also, you can learn more on the Emoji Subcommittee website. But the 3 hearts, for example, the 3 color hearts, again, it's filling in that gap for representing national or identity flag colors using hearts, right? The shaking face emoji is pretty fun. It's, again, we talked about smileys being the most frequently used emoji category. And so, this is a great addition. It's an expression that isn't really representable yet, right? The Konda emoji, which is the purple square, that is a symbol representative of Sikhism. And so then there's the other objects, the folding hand fan, the maracas, the hair pick, flute. These are all filling in cultural gaps within the emoji set. Then there's animals. These animals all mean something. Animals are also very fun, right? And so, yes, there's so many reasons why each one of these emoji were added. And, I can't go through all of them. But again, it's wonderful to think about. I encourage you to think about each one. And also, I'm curious to hear what your favorite one is. And if there is any specific way that you are looking forward to using them. All right. I want to go into emoji sequences a bit more because I believe it's an important part of emoji use. Emoji are meant to be used together. If it doesn't exist, create a sequence. This is a great idea. I took this I took some of these examples from the Emoji Subcommittee website. For example, what do these 3 emoji mean? I kind of gave a hint. I started doing the motion with my hands. It means to wash your hands, right? for example, you want to use the washing hands emoji, but it doesn't exist, right? There's no specific washing hands emoji. You can make a sequence. And, you know, when you use emoji in sequences, it starts telling a story. You can tell stories with emoji now, right? It's an awesome way. It's an awesome way to use emoji. So going on to the next one, a good emoji adds meaning in a sequence. Trash bin and fire, right? We've used dumpster fire lots of ways and lots of different contexts. And both of these emoji are contributing a lot to this story that we're looking at, right? The trash fire. It wouldn't have that meaning if one of them was missing, right? If fire wasn't in that sequence, we would just be looking at a trash bin. If we were looking at just fire, we wouldn't be thinking about trash bin on fire, the dumpster on fire concept. The next is a little different. A sequence of repetitive emoji emphasizes emotion. Have you noticed this before? I definitely do this a lot. In real life, like I'm moving a lot, right? I'm moving my hands a lot. I'm emphasizing. We do this all the time. It's a natural part of communication, and it's hard to emphasize when communicating digitally sometimes, right? Our fonts do a great job of doing that, but you want to bring that to another step, then you can repeat emoji in a sequence, and that will emphasize emotion. And then the last one is very important. Emoji with skin tone modifiers are made with sequences. We're going to dive a little bit into the tech behind that. But this is great to know. You know, how are emoji with skin modifiers and other types of modifiers working? Well, we're going to talk about that. So yeah, let's dive a little bit into the tech behind all of this, right? An example with skin tone modifiers, these emoji are made using sequences. So this is a look at a little part of the glyph substitution table, which is substituting glyphs, right? That's what that table is doing. And when we're looking at it, I'm going to use my pointer here. Hello. First, we're going to look at this glyph. This is the first glyph here. This hand with no skin tone attached to it, right? Not yet. So when this is written out, it's going to detect that, okay, this is the first glyph I'm looking for. Okay, that's the hand glyph. That's the code point. Good. Now let's move on. Then next is the component. So this component, all of these components are actually, they're relating to the skin tone modifier. So each skin tone modifier has its own code point. And so it's looking for that as the second code point in the sequence. So when it detects that, it's now going to point at this other glyph, right? And I just named them glyph 1, glyph 2, glyph 3, blah, blah, blah. But this glyph is supposed to be the glyph with the skin tone modifier applied, right? So when you're designing, you're going to design these emoji with the skin tones. And so this is how that substitution works, and it's pretty cool. It's good to know about. So going into Zwitch sequences, some emoji are made using Zwitch emoji sequences. Zwitch stands for zero width joiner. This is a Unicode character used to join other characters in a sequence to create a new emoji. In the previous slides, we talked about skin modifiers. I believe most of the time, skin modifiers are not actually using Zwitch, so we've moved on to a different type of sequence. So let's go. So continuing on with Zwitch sequences, here's an example, right? The handshaking emoji with skin tone modifiers. This is a complicated one, and so I wanted to talk about it. Let me take out my cursor again. There it is. So let's look at it. We already kind of learned about this in the previous slide with the skin tone modifier, but again, we're looking for that first glyph, the code point attached, and there it is. That's the one. Next, we're going to look at for the second glyph, which is the skin tone modifier with this specific code point. There it is. It matches, so we move on. Then there is a Zwitch character. As we said, it is a character in the middle here, and So then it detects that and it moves on. So this is basically, this switch is, if you notice, it's putting together this emoji and this emoji, right? And then it's on its own, this emoji is becoming its emoji by applying that skin tone modifier in the way that we looked at already. So that's what's basically happening. And then this is being substituted. This whole sequence is being substituted with the actual emoji that we want to see, right? That glyph with the handshaking glyph with the skin tone modifiers applied. And lastly, I want to talk about RGI versus non-RGI. RGI is recommended for general interchange. So these sequences, and there's different types of sequences, as we said. Some of them are RGI. So basically, they're recommended to be used. For example, here's Black Cat. This Black Cat was actually recommended for developers, whoever's working on a font, right, to have this sequence be within the font, defined within the font, so that this Black Cat could be made, right? And however, there's lots of RGI. There are lots of RGI characters, right? However, there's also non-RGI characters. This is where I want to mention, because there's so many capabilities that we can explore. Non-RGI custom switch sequences, as an example. This is the Microsoft's Hacker Cat right here. It's pretty awesome, and they made this custom switch sequence where they're combining cat face with a laptop and a switch character, using the switch character to combine them, and they're making an awesome Hacker Cat. And so I want to mention that because if you haven't thought of it already, there's so many use cases of emoji, and there's ways for you to add these capabilities as you're thinking about implementing emoji as a font, right? Making a font with emoji, or making an emoji font, blah blah. But it's really cool, really fun, and so I hope you're thinking about that as we discuss here. So to summarize, emoji are fun and powerful. How will you use emoji within your work and personal life? Thank you again for coming. I believe now it's time for Q&A. I'm excited to hear your questions, hear your thoughts, all of that.
Thank you so much, Kamile.
Thank you as well. I already saw a great question in the question portal, so
yeah, I think we all learned a lot about emoji there. I certainly did, about the goose, the zwidge, and how to make a black cat. Lots of good stuff there. Let's go straight into the question from Siva, though. So I'll just read it out for those who are not looking at the questions. Siva Kalyan asks, how do you determine the meanings of a proposed emoji if it hasn't been used as an emoji before?
Yes, so this is a great question. You're thinking about emoji in exactly the way that you should be when thinking about the proposals. And so you will see, a great reference is the Unicode emoji website. So there is a whole section on the emoji proposals. You can just search for it. So I actually used that as a reference when I was submitting a proposal on behalf of the committee in this past cycle. So when we're looking at these proposed emoji and we're looking at these proposals, it's actually a few pages of the writer explaining what the concept of this emoji is. So yes, the submission itself, the emoji itself doesn't exist yet, right? That's why it's being proposed, but the concept should exist. That's one of the main use cases of why an emoji can be encoded. Like, it should be a concept that already exists. We look at the history of that concept, like, has this object, or has this feeling, this emotion, has this been globally recognized for a long time? So we look at the history, and that's why those criteria come into play. We're looking at the multiple uses, things like that. So, I'm curious if you had an example that you were wondering about with your question. Feel free to mention that, and we can go more into it.
Thanks, Shiva. Yeah, it makes me think that sometimes when you look up an emoji on these reference sites, you often see a 2 or 3 paragraph little description about them. It strikes me that some of these concepts are so multifaceted and mean different things in different cultures. Sometimes I'd like to read a whole article about what this symbol could mean, and perhaps even a link to discussions that happened within the Unicode consortium between the proposer and between experts at Unicode and elsewhere.
Oh, you're saying you would want to, as an audience, like you would want to see more references to.
It would be nice if there was a general reference to where to the discussion behind how come this emoji exists.
I see. Actually, so the discussions themselves, those are, I think, mostly protected. But so when we're discussing the emoji, we're looking at the proposal and the PDF, and we do research outside of that. But even when we do, we usually, if that there's a certain part of the proposal that is missing some explanation, we'll ask the author of that proposal to add that in. So, and I mentioned this because I believe on that website, the same website with the emoji proposal template, there's also examples. And I saw the most recent emoji as part of Emoji 15.0. Those proposals are actually up on that website. So you can actually click those proposals and read through what we did, read through what we read. And those should really encapsulate the main idea behind that emoji. So it is kind of already out there. Certainly, yes, we do a lot of research, and my throughout review cycles, my search history is very random, like random objects, random all these different concepts, right? So it's really fun. It's a great learning experience too. Yes, that is a great source. I just see another question now.
It's from Shiva again. It occurs to me that a lot of emoji originate in facial expressions and gestures. For example, the salute emoji or the Vulcan salute. Do you actively use this as a source? I don't know what Shiva's talking about. Facial.
I guess the smileys, right? The smileys with the different emoji with the different faces. I'm not sure which source you're referring to, but I can talk to you about how smileys are reviewed. So the smiley category, as I mentioned in the recording, is the category that's most frequently used. This is part of the Unicode emoji subcommittee emoji frequency data, and that's also available for you to see. Facial expressions, one eyebrow raised, the Colbert emoji. So when we're looking at something like that, for example, it shouldn't just exist as, like, there shouldn't be just one source of this, right? I've seen in those types of proposals, there's lots of examples of those expressions in the media, but in the world, right? Maybe it's an expression that's in different parts of the world, and the proposal explains all of this. So, and we look at it really like, is this expression globally recognized? Is it going to stay relevant for a long period of time? Because as I said, once you encode an emoji, you can't unencode it. So we want that expression to stay relevant, right? So our angry face, for example, the angry face has relatively stayed as the same expression for centuries, right? Like with the eyebrows and the scrunched up face. So it's very recognizable. There isn't just one example. It's a part of humanity, and in a way, emoji kind of is a reflection of humanity, right? So really, we're looking for when looking at what makes a good expression emoji. Really, you should be looking at is this iconic, and is this recognizable globally and throughout history?
Yeah, Shiva adds specifically the one eyebrow raised, which to which Shiva adds, also known as the Colbert emoji. Now, plenty of people in the world have never even heard of Colbert, Stephen Colbert, let alone watched his shows. So, but they presumably know very well the one eyebrow raised expression, whether or not it means the same thing in their culture as it does to Mr. Colbert. It is iconic in most cultures in the world, so it deserves to be an emoji, I guess.
Actually, I didn't. I'm not sure if I knew that it was called the Colbert emoji.
I did not know that.
I do the eyebrow raise all the time. Like if he said something questionable, right? It's just automatically my eyebrow goes up.
We have a question from Peter van Blokland. What happens if suddenly, for example, from strong events that we see nowadays, meanings change or reverse, other than foreseen by the committee?
Mm-hmm.
Can it become, I think he's talking about, can a particular emoji become undefined or abandoned?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, the first point is we can't unencode an emoji, right? But we can certainly discuss emoji that have already been encoded. We even look at ways of improving some emoji that aren't being frequently used, right? There's those types of emoji. There's, as you said, emoji that turn out to have other meanings that hadn't been recognized before. And we talk in the committee about this for a while, and there is an opportunity to redesign. And because most of the vendors are in the room, the vendors who have emoji fonts specific to their platform, we can all discuss how we can improve the design of that emoji, for example.
I remember the most famous one is probably the pistol emoji. Mm-hmm. Was that one where all of the vendors agreed to redesign it before Apple did? I think Apple was the first to redesign it.
That's a good question. I remember that happening too, because I followed emoji updates for a long time, even before I was in the industry. I was a student, right? So I wasn't actually in the committee at the time. I'm not sure if I know the full details of.
No, I checked recently for I think they all are friendly water pistols now. But that adds I haven't actually. One thing font I didn't check was where the Noto emoji, which is the unusual monochrome emoji font, how that encodes that particular character. It makes me think though, is there a bias against unpleasant emotions in emoji, and why was that gun deemed that it needs to be redesigned? Is there some kind of, I don't know, some kind of role of some kind of therapist or chaplain getting it in terms of design, that we want to take people's negative emotions out of conversations a little bit?
Right. Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's let me see how to best answer it. This redesign of the pistol emoji is actually such a great example of this, right? And I was thinking of that too, so I'm glad you mentioned it. It's difficult to make decisions that impact basically the emoji set that the world uses, right? Because as you said, yes, there is on the one hand, we want to be authentic to humanity. On another hand, it is a responsibility. The decisions we're making on what emoji are being encoded, it is our responsibility. And in the discussions I've been in, people have been very intentionally making decisions that will benefit the emoji set. So when you said like emoji with negative connotations, I guess in a way we don't, or I personally don't want to be adding an emoji that could potentially, create a problem, that could potentially give someone a tool to add negativity into digital space, right? And again, yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, and we have very lengthy discussions about this, and it gets complicated. It's also case by case. So that's what we do bring in specialists sometimes, and we listen to some researchers who have more knowledge about these specific concepts. So it's really case by case.
Yeah, no, it sounds a really tricky compromise to balance.
Yes,
I think you'd have a lot of sympathy from anyone in that role, even philosophers included. It's a tough call. I'm going to add Peter van Blocken, who asked the previous question about meanings changing. He's added another point about upside down flags, specifically the Dutch one. I assume he's talking about that being misinterpreted as a Russian flag, getting totally new meanings in the past year that did not exist before. Will that meaning be added to the description of the Unicode? I'm not sure how a flag ever becomes upside down, though. That wouldn't happen in a normal text setting. Peter adds that people put the flag upside down to protest against the government. Yeah, interesting point.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I don't know if I have an answer for you. It's not like just me making a decision like this, but it's certainly something that we'll probably be discussing soon. Like so when we hear about these things, we bring it up. The committee brings it up, and we have these discussions. But I haven't heard of any. I haven't been involved in any discussion specific to this yet. But since you brought it up, I'll definitely probably bring it up as well.
How do you do that to a Japanese flag? The designers might think, "Oh, this is stupid."
Yeah, should there be I often wonder, should there be a black border around the Japanese flag to help it not appear as just a red circle in some?
Actually, Union Jack might be the same case, but anyway.
I had one question about when you create documents that include emoji. What mechanisms are there? I know in some documents there are no mechanisms, but what might be being discussed in order to preserve the appearance of that emoji permanently, like in a PDF or even a web page? Often the system emoji font is used, which could change.
Yes, that's such a good question.
If that document is opened next year or in 5 years or 10 years. How does the consortium and Adobe address that issue?
So yeah, that's a great question, and it's like that's there's the example of documents, and then there's examples of even just there's been misunderstandings in between people just from sending a message, and they receive a different emoji because they're on a different platform, right? They're on a different device. When you talk about documents, I think about that a lot. Like personally, I think about it a lot when we're having those discussions about potential, just like discussing the redesigns and how we can improve something. And that's why it takes a long time. It takes a lot of these discussions. And so I can't reveal too much, which is why I keep kind of doing a general overview, and I hope it's answering the question in some way. But yes, so the way I do it, I'm usually sometimes, if it's something, if it's a document where I know it's not that important what the visual of that emoji looks like, I'll just use the regular character. But I do use images. Like I use screenshots of emoji, and you bring up a great point, because this is one of the issues we face. And what I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed this as well, but the typical user who doesn't have a lot of knowledge about fonts they don't realize that emoji are different because they are different fonts, right? This is something that is not very clear to people. And then you go into, in the beginning, I said that I was talking about emoji implemented as fonts, but that's not even the only case anymore. There's stickers, right? There's images, there's illustrations, and, there's a blurry line. I'm kind of going outside of your question now, but it's, it's still, that's why we're doing these talks, and the committee still is actively doing this work. And at Adobe, we're doing this research as well. How do we preserve, as you said, that style of emoji in documents, and very serious documents. There are some serious documents and things like that, without changing the meaning, but being ready for that emoji to change based on the platform. I think, so that's why the best way I can answer is the redesign discussion is really, it's a big deal. We don't just take it serious. We don't take it lightly. It's very serious. We make we do lots of research on it. We discuss it heavily, because we know the impact that it can have.
Yep. Well, we're coming up to the hour, so we've got to wrap this up pretty soon. So I'll just one final call for to type your questions in the chat or the Q&A. And if there are no more, I'll just say thank you very much to Toshi. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No. Anyway, yeah,
Okay.
it's fine. Yeah.
I'll just thank Kamile and Demir again for your lovely presentation and thoughtful discussion afterwards. So thanks again. If we could all applause, I'm sure we would. So thanks again. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you so much. I really, enjoyed this, and I hope we continue having these discussions, and I look forward to even more.
Yeah, I'm sure if people want to continue the conversation in the Hangout room, I'm sure, I hope Kamile will be up for that. Unfortunately, I can't join you there, but I'm sure the critical mass of attendees who need to ask you more questions can make that entertaining as well. So, okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks again. Bye, Kamile.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.